Tamsin poured her supper into the foal's mouth, hands trembling. The little thing sucked greedily, ribs jumping under its hide like fingers under a blanket. She kept one eye on the shadows of the corral fence, listening for Boots, because the last time Dee tried to do the right thing on someone else's land, it had cost her a job and a bruise she didn't talk about. She had no right to be here, and she knew it. But the foal was too small to be left hungry, and Tamsin's own belly had learned the patience of empty days. If the rancher caught her, he could run her off, call the law, or do worse, and nobody in town would take a drifter girl's word over his. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. She tipped the tin plate again, letting the last of the beans slide down. The foal's muzzle bumped her knuckles, warm and searching, and that simple trust made something in her chest tighten. "Easy," she whispered, as if the animal could understand a promise. A horse snorted behind her. Tamsin froze mid-breath. Not the foal. A full-grown horse close enough that she could hear the soft grind of teeth on a bit. The sound meant saddle. Rider. Somebody who owned this land. She set the plate down as gently as if it were glass and raised both hands, palms forward. "I'm leaving," she said to the dark, voice steady by force. "I fed him, that's all. I didn't take anything else." A man's voice came from the fence line, low, controlled, not drunk, not friendly. "You poured your supper into my stock." He didn't ask it like a question. Tamsin swallowed. Her throat felt too small for the moment. "Yes, sir." Boots moved. Slow steps, measured like he didn't like surprises. "You got a name?" Her mind raced through the truth, and all the ways truth could turn mean in someone else's mouth. She could lie, but a lie had a shape that didn't fit long. And something about the voice calm, as a knife laid flat told her lies would be noticed. "Tamsin," she said. Tamsin Kroll. The man came into the lamplight from the barn lantern hanging on a post. He wasn't tall the way town men bragged about being tall. He was tall the way fence posts were tall, useful, steady, built for wind and weight. Dark hair, dust on his hat brim, eyes the color of old iron. His gaze went first to the foal, then to the empty plate, then to her face. Tamsin felt that last look like fingertips against a bruise. "Crowell," he repeated, as if tasting whether the name belonged to trouble. "It's just a name," she said quickly. I'm not anybody you'd have heard of." He didn't answer right away. He studied the foal's ribs, the way it leaned into her, the way it didn't flinch. "That foal's been refusing mash," he said. Tamsin's hands drifted down to her sides. "He's hungry enough for beans." A muscle jumped in the rancher's jaw. He looked at her again, this time not like he was weighing guilt, but like he was weighing sense. "You climbed my fence to feed him." "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question hit harder than accusation. It asked her to explain a softness she had spent years trying to hide. "Because he was calling," she said, and then because she couldn't stop herself. "And because I know what it is to be small and—" Left. The man's eyes narrowed, not cruel, just sharp. "You hungry?" Tamsin's pride lunged up like a guard dog. Her mouth tried to say no. Her stomach betrayed her with a low, humiliating sound. He heard it. Of course he did. The rancher looked away first, as if it made it easier for her to breathe. "What's your business in Cinder Gulch?" he asked. "I'm looking for work. Town's got work. Town's got men who think work means I owe them something." The words slipped out before she could sand them smooth. He turned back, eyes colder. "Somebody hurt you?" Tamsin lifted her chin. "I said I'm looking for work." That's all she would give. That's all she could afford. The rancher's gaze went to her hands. Calloused. Not pretty hands, not gentle. Hands that had scraped pans, twisted rags, lifted water, and counted coins until the edges cut. "You can ride?" "A little. Shoot?" "No." "Lie?" She blinked. I can, but I don't. Something almost a breath of a smile moved at the corner of his mouth and disappeared. He reached up and unhooked the barn lantern from the post, the light shifting across his knuckles. Come on, he said. Tamsin didn't move. I'm not. You're not under arrest. His tone held a warning. Don't make him repeat himself. But you're not walking back to town in the dark either. Not with coyotes and worse. You're coming to the house to eat something that I meant for a foal. I can't pay, she said. I didn't ask for pay. She stared at him, trying to find the trick. Kindness always had a hook. If it didn't, it usually came later. I'm not a charity case, she whispered. His gaze didn't soften. It didn't need to. I'm not running a charity, he said. I'm running a ranch. And I'm not losing stock because someone decided it was cheaper to let it starve. He glanced toward the foal again, voice quieting. You did right by him, he added, as if it mattered. Tamsin's throat burned. She followed him along the packed earth path, keeping 3 steps behind the horse, like she'd been trained to do, never too close, never where a kit could find you. The ranch house sat back from the corral, a solid shape with lamplight in the windows and a sense of life inside. Not warmth like a storybook. Warmth like a place where someone expected tomorrow to come. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, saddle soap, and something savory. A woman's voice called, Gideon? So that was his name. Gideon. He answered without raising his voice. Marta, put another plate on. Another set of footsteps came heavier, older, sure. A woman with gray, threaded through her braid appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes took Tamsin in, with the quick assessment of someone who had survived long enough to trust nothing on first glance. And who is this? Marta asked. Found her in the corral feeding Juniper, Gideon said. Marta's eyebrows climbed. Feeding Juniper? Tamsin's cheeks flamed. He was hungry. Marta's gaze sharpened, then softened by a fraction when she saw the empty plate in Tamsin's hands. And you were what? Marta asked. Offering your last bite? Tamsin's fingers curled tighter around the tin. Gideon stepped between them without touching either of them. She's here to eat, he said. Then she'll tell me what kind of work she can do. Marta's mouth tightened, but she nodded once, brisk. Sick. Tamsin sat at the edge of a chair like it might vanish. Marta set a bowl in front of her stew with potatoes and meat, steam lifting in the lamplight. Bread? Real bread. Tamsin stared too long. Gideon sat across from her, hat set aside, elbows on the table like a man who belonged to hard surfaces. Eat, he said. Tamsin picked up the spoon. Her hand shook. The first mouthful nearly broke her. She kept her face down, swallowing fast so nobody could see the emotion trying to climb into her eyes. Hunger was one thing. Being offered enough was another. Marta watched her like a hawk watches a rabbit, part suspicion, part pity. Gideon watched her like a man reading a ledger, waiting for the numbers to tell the truth. When the bowl was half gone, Gideon spoke again. You said you're looking for work, he said. Yes. What kind? Tamsin set the spoon down carefully. She had learned the danger of sounding too eager. Eagerness made you easy. Whatever you need, she said. I can cook, clean, mend. I can keep a house in order. Marta snorted softly. Every girl says that. Tamsin's jaw tightened. I can. Gideon's eyes flicked toward Marta, then back. Can you keep books? The question hit like a stone dropped in a well. Tamsin's pulse jumped. Books? Ledgers, Gideon said. Orders, receipts, pay. Ranch needs a hand who can see straight numbers. Tamsin's mouth went dry. Most folks didn't ask that. Not because it wasn't useful, because it wasn't expected. I can read, she said slowly. Marta's eyes widened, then narrowed. You can? Tamsin forced her shoulders back. Yes. Where'd you learn? Marta asked, suspicion loud. Tamsin chose her words like stepping stones. A preacher, she said. He ran a little school for whoever showed up. He said a woman with letters could keep herself safer. Gideon didn't react to the word safer. He just nodded, as if it fit a theory he'd had. "Why are you not in town then?" he asked. Tamsin stared at her hands. "Because letters don't stop hunger." That was part of it. The other part was the way men's eyes in town didn't care whether she could read. They cared whether she would smile, whether she would be sweet, whether she would look pretty enough to make them feel important. Gideon leaned back in his chair. "I hired a bookkeeper once," he said. Tamsin waited. "He ran off with my winter feed money," Gideon finished. Marta's mouth tightened again, anger flashing. "And he left us with empty bins." Tamsin's stomach dropped. "I'm not him." Gideon's gaze pinned her. "No, you're not." The way he said it made her feel seen, and that was almost as frightening as being wanted. He stood, walked to a sideboard, and pulled out a folded paper. He set it on the table and slid it toward her. It was an advertisement. Help wanted. Not fancy, not flowery. A few lines about steady work on the Rusk Ranch. Wages. Board. One last line in a heavier hand. Honesty required. Tamsin's throat tightened. "You wrote this?" she asked. Gideon nodded. "And nobody came?" "Plenty came," Marta said, dry. "They lasted a day. Some lasted an hour." Tamsin looked up. "Why?" Gideon's jaw flexed. "Because the ranch is in trouble." The words sat heavy. "In trouble, like men in town are betting on when I'll fold." His eyes held hers. "Like somebody's been bleeding me slow. Like my cattle counts don't match my pasture. Like my name is being dragged through dirt, so it's easier to take what is mine." Tamsin's spine went cold. "Who?" Gideon's gaze shifted toward the window, as if the answer lived out there. "Barlow Grint," he said. "Owns the biggest spread north of here, and thinks he ought to own mine, too. He's got the bank in his pocket and the sheriff in his ear. He's been circling like a buzzard." Marta crossed her arms. "And now he sent his boys to snatch calves at night," she said, voice sharp. "Or he's paying someone already inside." Inside? Tamsin felt the word like a shiver. Gideon looked back at her. "You still want work?" Tamsin's pride whispered to run. Trouble had teeth. But the warmth in her belly from stew and bread whispered something else. You can outrun hunger forever. "I want work," she said. Gideon nodded once, decisive. "You can stay tonight," he said. "Marta will show you a room. Tomorrow you'll start with the books. If you lie, if you steal, if you cause trouble—" "I won't," Tamsin said quickly. His eyes held hers. "If you do, you'll regret it." She believed him. Marta led her down a hall and pointed to a small room with a narrow bed and a washstand. "It's clean," Marta said. "You keep it that way." "I will," Tamsin promised. Marta hesitated, then lowered her voice. "He's not a cruel man," Marta said, "but he's been bruised. So have I," Tamsin said before she could stop herself. Marta studied her, gaze lingering on the faint scar that cut along Tamsin's cheekbone, half hidden in the lamplight. "That one?" Marta asked. Tamsin's fingers rose instinctively to her face. "Just an old thing," she said. Marta didn't press. She just nodded. "Sleep. Tomorrow starts early." When the house finally quieted, Tamsin lay on the bed staring up at the ceiling, listening to the ranch settle. She could hear Gideon's boots moving in another room, slow and heavy, like he hadn't learned how to rest. She thought of the foal sucking beans from her tin plate and felt a strange warmth at the center of her chest. Then she thought of the words on the advertisement. Honesty required. It sounded like a request. It sounded like a plea. It sounded like a trap. She slept anyway. Morning came hard and immediate. Marta shoved a mug of coffee into her hands before Tamsin's eyes had fully opened. "Drink," she said, already moving. "Then you'll help me with breakfast." Tamsin sat up fast, heart pounding, instinctively checking that she was still alone, still safe. The room was plain, the bed narrow. The air carried the smell of grease and bread, a workhouse smell. Marta's kitchen was all movement and sharp commands. Eggs, Marta snapped. Tamsin cracked eggs into a pan, watching her own hands and trying not to think about how long it had been since she cooked for more than herself. The ranch hands filed in men with sun-creased faces and shoulders made broad by labor. Their eyes slid over her, some curious, some amused, some flat. One man stopped longer than the rest. He had a foreman's stance, the kind that filled space because it was used to being obeyed. His hair was pale, his eyes quick, his smile thin as a wire. "Well now," he said. "What's this?" Marta didn't look up. "Breakfast," she said. The foreman's gaze stayed on Tamsin. "I meant her." Tamsin kept her attention on the eggs. "Tamsin," she said, "I'm here to work." The foreman's smile widened, not friendly. "Work," he repeated, like the word amused him. "Gideon pick you up off the road?" "He found her feeding juniper," Marta snapped. That made a few men laugh. The foreman's eyebrows rose. "Feeding stock, huh? Brave or foolish?" Tamsin set the pan down and faced him, careful with her posture. "I didn't do it to be brave," she said. "I did it because he was hungry." The foreman's eyes flicked over her face, pausing a beat too long on her scar. "Huh," he said. "So you're the soft kind?" Tamsin's jaw clenched. "I'm the working kind." He leaned in, close enough that she could smell tobacco on his breath. "Name's Cal Hensley," he said. "I run the hands here. You'll do what Marta tells you, and you'll stay out of my way. Understood?" Tamsin met his gaze. She didn't like him. She didn't trust him, but she understood power. "Understood," she said. Cal's smile thinned. "Good." He turned and sauntered to the table as if he owned the chair. Gideon came in a moment later, coat half buttoned, hair still damp from washing. He didn't look at Tamsin first. He looked at Cal. Cal's smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened. "Morning," Cal said. Gideon nodded once. "Morning." He moved to the coffee pot, poured a cup, then glanced at Tamsin. "You slept?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." One word, but it sat in her chest like approval. After breakfast, Gideon led her to a small office off the main room. A desk, a chair, shelves of paper. Not fancy, but orderly. He opened a drawer and pulled out a ledger that looked like it had been handled too often. "Here," he said, placing it in front of her. Tamsin's fingers hovered over the worn cover. "You sure?" she asked. Gideon's gaze held hers. "No, that's why I'm watching. Honest, not trusting. A man who'd learned the difference." Tamsin opened the ledger. Columns of numbers marched down the pages. Feed orders, cattle sales, wages, repairs. She ran her finger along the ink, reading the shapes like they were a language she'd always known. Her stomach tightened. There were gaps. Numbers scratched out and rewritten. Receipts that didn't match totals. It wasn't sloppy. It was intentional. Tamsin looked up slowly. "These entries," she said, tapping a page. "They're wrong." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "How do you know?" "Because the totals don't add," she said. "And because whoever did this used different ink on the same day. See?" she pointed. Gideon leaned in. For a moment he was close enough that she could see the faint lines of exhaustion at the corners of his eyes. He smelled like soap and leather. His gaze followed her finger. "I didn't notice that," he admitted. "It's easy to miss if you're not staring at it," she said. Gideon straightened, expression hardening. "Who keeps these?" he asked. "Marta said you hired a bookkeeper." "I did. He left. Then Cal said he'd keep track until I found someone else." Tamsin's chest tightened. "Cal." She forced herself not to look toward the kitchen. Gideon watched her face as if reading her thoughts. "Say it," he said. Tamsin swallowed. It doesn't prove anything, she said carefully. But whoever wrote these wanted you to lose money. Gideon's jaw flexed. I already know that. He paced once, then stopped. I've got a meeting in town tomorrow, he said. With the bank. Tamsin's stomach dropped. That's bad, she said. Gideon's eyes flashed. It's necessary. Marta came in then, wiping her hands. Necessary, she repeated, voice bitter. That bank is a snake pit. Gideon looked at her. I'm not going alone. Marta's eyes widened. You're taking Cal? No. Gideon's gaze shifted to Tamsin. Tamsin's breath caught me. Gideon's voice stayed steady. I need someone who can speak plain truth and see plain numbers. I need someone who won't smile and let them twist my words. Marta's mouth tightened. She's new, she warned. I know, Gideon said. Tamsin's heart hammered. I'm not anyone important, she said. Gideon's eyes held hers. That's why I'm considering you. The words hit like a slap and a compliment all at once. Marta's gaze softened, just a little. Gideon leaned his hands on the desk, lowering his voice. There's another problem, he said. Tamsin's skin prickled. What? Gideon's jaw flexed again, and for the first time she saw hesitation in him. The bank has been demanding a co-signer, he said. Someone who ties me to the ranch in a way they can't deny. Marta went still. Gideon, she said, warning. Tamsin's mind raced. Co-signer, like a partner? Gideon's eyes didn't move from her face. Like a wife, he said. The room went quiet enough that Tamsin could hear her own heartbeat. Marta swore softly under her breath. Tamsin stared at Gideon, half expecting him to laugh and say it was a cruel joke. He didn't. Her throat tightened. You don't even know me, she said. I know you climbed a fence to feed a starving foal with your own supper, Gideon said. I know you didn't ask for praise. I know you read a ledger like you've been waiting your whole life for someone to hand you one. Tamsin's cheeks burned. That doesn't mean. It means something, he cut in, voice firm. I've had women in town offer me smiles and promises. They're pretty. They're polished. They know how to talk. And every one of them wants something that ends with my land in their hands or Grint's. Marta's eyes flashed. Truth. Tamsin's voice came out thin. So you want what, exactly? Gideon's gaze stayed direct. An agreement, a contract. A marriage on paper, nothing more, unless you want it to be. Tamsin's breath caught. Her stomach clenched with fear and anger, and a sharp ache she didn't have a name for. Men always said things like nothing more. Then they took. She forced her voice steady. And if I say no, then you keep working here if you want, Gideon said. And I'll find another way. Tamsin studied him. His eyes didn't shift. He looked like a man offering a deal, not a man offering a trap. Still her ribs tightened around her lungs. I'm not pretty, she whispered, and hated herself for saying it. The words were old, not just in her mouth, in her bones. They'd been thrown at her in laughter. They'd been said with pity. They'd been said with a man's disappointment when she didn't make him feel like a king. Gideon didn't react like she expected. He didn't flinch. He didn't look her over like a buyer. He just nodded once, slow. That's fine, he said. I need honest, not fancy. Something in Tamsin cracked quietly, like ice under weight. Marta stared at Gideon, as if she couldn't decide whether to smack him or hug him. Tamsin swallowed hard. You mean it, she said. Gideon's gaze held steady. I mean it. Tamsin's hands shook. She pressed them flat on the ledger. And if I do this, she said, voice low, I keep my dignity. Gideon's eyes narrowed. You keep whatever you bring, he said. I'm not buying you. The words landed like a blanket over a wound. Tamsin stared at him, trying to find the catch. What would you need me to do? She asked. Stand beside me at the bank, Gideon said. Sign what needs signing. Let them see I'm not alone and not easy to push. And after? Gideon exhaled slowly. After we see if we can save this place. Marta crossed her arms. And if she says yes, she said, eyes hard on Gideon, you treat her like a person, not a tool. Gideon's gaze didn't waver. I know. Tamsin's throat burned. She could say no. She could walk back to town and take whatever scraps were offered. Or she could step into a deal that might protect her and still swallow her whole. She lifted her chin. If I say yes, she said, I want terms. Gideon's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, something like respect. Good, he said. So do I. They wrote the terms that afternoon, not a romantic promise, not a preacher's vow, a plain agreement on paper, witnessed by Marta, because Marta insisted. Separate rooms, no touching unless asked and answered. Wages for her work, real wages. The option to walk away if either of them broke the deal. Tamsin signed her name with a steady hand. She felt strange doing it, like she was stepping into boots that didn't quite fit yet. Gideon signed too, his signature bold, decisive. When it was done, he folded the paper and slid it into a tin box. That's that, he said. Tamsin nodded, heart still hammering. Now, Gideon added, I need you to show me what else you see in those books. So she did. For hours, she sat at the desk, reading numbers like footprints. She found orders for feed that never arrived, repairs charged twice, wages paid to men who didn't work here, and always, always, the same handwriting lurking in the margins. Calves. She didn't say it yet. She didn't know enough. But suspicion grew inside her like a seed. By late afternoon, Marta handed her a rag and pointed toward the washstand. You'll want to clean up, Marta said. We're going to town at first light tomorrow. Tamsin stared. You're coming? Marta's eyes flashed. I'm not letting that bank see you alone with men who think they can bend a woman like a spoon. Tamsin's chest tightened. Thank you, she whispered. Marta grunted. Don't thank me. Just be smart. As evening settled over the ranch, Gideon moved through the yard with the restless energy of a man counting threats. He checked fences, walked the corral, ran his hand along a gate latch like he didn't trust it. Tamsin watched from the porch, her fingers wrapped around a mug. She shouldn't care. Caring made you weak. But she had already poured her supper into someone else's hunger. She had already stepped over the line. Gideon caught her watching and paused. You ride tomorrow, he said. I said I can ride a little. That's not enough, he said. He walked toward her and stopped a respectful distance away. You'll need to look like you belong beside me, he said. Not like a girl waiting to be pushed. Tamsin's mouth tightened. I'm not waiting, she said. Something flickered in his eyes. Show me, he said. So he did. He led her to a calm mare and showed her how to hold the reins, how to sit without gripping like fear. He spoke plain and quick, like a man used to teaching himself. Tamsin climbed into the saddle and forced her spine straight. The mare shifted under her. Tamsin's hands clenched. Gideon's voice came from beside her. Breathe, he said. She'll feel it. Tamsin exhaled slowly. The mare settled. Good, Gideon said. The word hit her again, small and powerful. She guided the mare forward, circling the yard. At first her movements were stiff. Then slowly her body remembered older rhythms. Her mother's hands guiding hers as a child, her father's laughter before it turned bitter. Not a flashback, just a sensation, a memory in muscle. She rode one circle, then another. When she brought the mare back, Gideon stood with his arms crossed, watching like he wasn't sure whether he wanted to be impressed. You learn fast, he said. I've always learned fast, she replied. His gaze held hers. Then maybe you'll survive Cinder Gulch. Tamsin's stomach tightened. Is it that bad? She asked. Gideon's eyes darkened. It's bad when Grint wants something. Night brought the kind of quiet that made Tamsin's skin itch. She sat at the desk again, one lamp burning, the ledger open. She kept hearing Cal's voice. "Stay out of my way." She ran the numbers again. The theft wasn't random. It followed a pattern, small losses that grew, like someone testing how much they could take without being noticed. And then she saw it. A name, not a ranch hand, not a supplier. A payment listed as services to a man called Jory Kincaid. Tamsin's pulse jumped. She had heard that name in town. Jory Kincaid worked for Cal and Grint. Tamsin's fingers went cold. She stood fast enough that her chair scraped. Gideon's footsteps appeared in the hall, quick. He stepped in, eyes sharp. "What is it?" Tamsin pointed, hand trembling. "This," she said. "This payment. It's Grint's man." Gideon leaned over her shoulder. For a moment, his breath brushed her hair. Tamsin went still, not because she wanted to, because closeness still made her body brace for harm. Gideon didn't touch her. He just read. His jaw tightened. "Kincaid," he murmured. "You know him?" "I know of him," Gideon said. "He's a rat with a smile." Tamsin's voice shook. "If Cal's paying him—" Gideon's gaze cut to her. "Don't say Cal's name unless you're sure," he warned. Tamsin swallowed. "Then we need proof," she said. Gideon's eyes held hers. "Can you get it?" he asked. The question shouldn't have stirred her pride, but it did. She straightened. "Yes," she said. Gideon nodded once. "Then be careful." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Tamsin?" She looked up, his gaze softened by a fraction. "You did good today," he said. Then he was gone. Tamsin stood in the quiet, heart beating hard. Good. No one had called her that in a long time. She didn't sleep much. The next day came, and they rode to town. Tamsin kept her back straight, her face calm, her hands steady on the reins. Marta rode beside her like a shield. Gideon rode on the other side, silent, eyes scanning every corner of the road ahead as if expecting an ambush made of paperwork and lies. In town, eyes followed them. Men in hats nudged each other. Women paused mid-step, because Gideon Rusk didn't bring strangers to town. And he certainly didn't bring a plain-faced girl with a scar and the posture of someone who de-learned to swallow pain. The bank smelled like ink, sweat, and power. The banker, Mr. Halver, smiled too wide. "Well," Halver said, eyes sliding over Tamsin, like she was a piece of furniture Gideon had dragged in. "This is unexpected." Gideon's voice stayed flat. "This is my wife," he said. The word hit Tamsin's chest. Wife. It didn't feel like romance. It felt like standing in front of a firing line with a borrowed coat. Halver's eyebrows rose. "Married?" "Newly," Gideon said. Halver's gaze stayed on Tamsin. "And her name?" Tamsin lifted her chin. "Mrs. Rusk," she said. Halver chuckled softly, like he'd already won. "And what does Mrs. Rusk bring to this arrangement?" Marta's eyes narrowed. Tamsin didn't look at Marta. She looked at Halver. "Honesty," she said. Halver blinked. Gideon's mouth twitched again, not quite a smile. The meeting turned ugly fast. Halver slid papers across the desk, talking about interest and deadlines, and how unfortunate it would be if a man as proud as Gideon Rusk couldn't meet his obligations. Gideon's jaw tightened. Tamsin watched the numbers, and she saw the trick. Halver was charging fees that weren't listed, stacking penalties, bleeding the ranch while pretending to offer help. Tamsin leaned forward. "That fee," she said, pointing. "What is it for?" Halver's smile sharpened. "Administrative." Tamsin's voice stayed calm. "That's not a category. It's a word." Halver's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Tamsin met his gaze. "If you can't name what it pays for, you can't charge it." The room went still. Gideon turned his head slowly toward her. Marta looked like she might laugh. Halver's smile thinned. "Little lady," he said, voice dripping condescension. Banks have procedures you wouldn't understand. Tamsin's pulse hammered. She could feel the old urge to shrink, to apologize, to make herself small enough to survive. But she remembered the full. She remembered Gideon's contract. She remembered the word good. She smiled, not sweet, not pretty, sharp. "I understand numbers," she said. "And I understand when a man uses big words to hide small theft." Halver's face reddened. Gideon's voice came low. "Answer her question," he said. Halver's gaze flicked between them. He leaned back, smile returning like a mask. "All right," he said. "Perhaps we can adjust." Tamsin didn't relax. Because masks didn't mean surrender. When the meeting ended, Halver shook Gideon's hand too hard and said, "Congratulations again?" His eyes on Tamsin added something unspoken. "We'll see how long she lasts." Outside the bank, Gideon exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. He looked at Tamsin, eyes bright with something she didn't know how to hold. "You didn't flinch," he said. Tamsin swallowed. "I wanted to, but you didn't." Marta huffed. "She's got spine," she said. "More than most men in that building." Tamsin felt heat rise to her cheeks. Praise still startled her. They rode home with the sun high and suspicion higher. Because if the bank backed down that easily, it meant something else had changed. And men like Halver didn't change unless someone bigger told them to. That night, Tamsin went back to the books. She wanted proof. Not guesses, not feelings. Proof that could cut through lies. She checked the supply room, the feed bins, the tack inventory. She compared the numbers to the ledger, loss after loss. And always, Cal's handwriting. She asked one of the younger hands, quiet, nervous about Kincaid. A man's eyes darted. "Don't say that name here," he muttered. "Why? He comes around some nights," the hand whispered. "Talks to Cal. They go to the barn. We're told to stay away." Tamsin's blood went cold. She waited. Not a day. Not a week. That very night. She sat in her room with her boots on, the lamp turned low. When the house quieted, she slipped out, moving like she'd learned to move when she didn't want men to notice. The yard was dark. Shapes of fences and buildings pressed against the night. She kept to shadows, heart pounding. The barn stood ahead like a sleeping animal. She crept closer. Voices drifted out. Cal's voice smooth, confident. Another voice rougher. Kincaid. Tamsin pressed herself against a post, listening. "Grint wants it done clean," Kincaid was saying. "No mess, no bodies. Just a man ruined and a ranch signed over," Cal chuckled. "Rusk is already halfway there," Kincaid snorted. "Not with that woman, no. She made Halver look like a fool." Cal's voice hardened. "She won't be a problem long." Tamsin's breath caught. Her fingers curled into fists. Kincaid spoke again. "Tomorrow night. We move the calves from the north pasture, same as before." Cal's boots scraped on hay. "And if Rusk notices?" Kincaid laughed softly. "Then we make sure the sheriff notices something else. A missing ledger. A forged signature. A debt he can't explain." Tamsin's stomach twisted. They weren't just stealing. They were building a noose. She shifted her weight, trying to back away. A board under her boot gave a small, traitorous creak. The voices inside the barn stopped. Silence fell heavy. Then Cal's voice came low and sharp. "Who's out there?" Tamsin's blood turned to ice. A lantern flared to life inside the barn, light spilling through the cracks. Footsteps moved toward the opening. Tamsin pressed herself flatter against the post, heart hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it. But there was nowhere to run without being seen, and whoever stepped out would be close enough to grab her before she took 3 steps. The barn shadows shifted. A figure filled the doorway, tall, broad, holding a lantern like a threat. Cal's voice sliced through the dark. "Come out," he said, "or I'll come find you." Tamsin's lungs locked. She didn't know if she should run. She didn't know if she should fight. She only knew Gideon was asleep in the house, trusting the wrong man to guard his ranch. And now she was about to learn what honesty cost when you stood too close to thieves. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Tamsin's body didn't move, but her mind ran hard enough to burn. Cal stood in the doorway, holding the lantern high, the light carving his face into sharp planes. Behind him, deeper in the barn, Kincaid's shadow shifted like a second threat. "Come out," Cal said again. Softer now, not kinder. Just certain. Tamsin tasted metal on her tongue. If she ran, the yard would open up and the lantern would paint her like a target. If she stayed, Cal would find her anyway. So she chose the third thing, the one people never expected, from a girl they had already decided was small. She stepped out. Not like a rabbit, like a woman with work to do. Cal's eyebrows lifted. "Well?" he drawled. "Look what wandered into the wrong stall." The lantern light hit her face and caught her scar, bright and plain. Tamsin kept her hands visible. Empty. "I heard voices," she said. "Thought something was wrong." Cal's smile spread a fraction, thin as a blade. "Something is wrong," he said. "A nosy little mouse in my barn after dark." Kincaid moved into view behind Cal, rougher looking, hat pushed low, eyes like old stones. He looked her over the way men in town had looked her over, like he was searching for whatever part of her could be bought or broken. "Told you she'd be trouble," Kincaid muttered. Tamsin didn't look at him. She looked at Cal. "I'm not trouble," she said. "I'm new here. Marta told me to lock up the ledger room, and I saw the barn light. I came to check." Cal's gaze narrowed. "Marta told you?" Tamsin nodded once, steady. Every lie felt like stepping on thin ice, but she had chosen truth too soon in her life and learned how quickly truth could drown. Cal took a slow step down from the doorway. "You got a funny way of checking," he said. Hiding behind posts, Tamsin forced her shoulders to stay back. "I didn't want to interrupt," she said. Kincaid laughed, low and ugly. "Hear that?" She didn't want to interrupt. Cal didn't laugh. He kept watching Tamsin's face, searching for cracks. "You're Gideon's wife now," Cal said. The word wife still landed strange, but tonight it gave her something to hold like a plank in deep water. "On paper," Tamsin said. Cal's eyes flashed. "Paper is enough when men read it the way they want." Kincaid stepped closer, the lantern light catching the edge of his jaw. "Go back to the house," he said, like it was advice. Tamsin didn't move. Cal's gaze slid over her hands. "You got anything on you?" "No," she said. Cal's smile returned, polite and poisonous. "Then you won't mind if we check." Tamsin's stomach tightened. She pictured hands grabbing at her pockets, at her skirt, at the places her body remembered being grabbed. Her lungs tried to lock. Then she remembered Gideon's terms. No touching unless asked and answered. She lifted her chin. "Cal," she said, voice quiet, "if you lay hands on me, Gideon will know. And if Gideon knows, he'll come looking. And if he comes looking, he won't ask questions first." Cal's smile faltered for half a heartbeat. So it was true. Gideon's name still carried weight. Kincaid spat to the side. "She's got a mouth." Cal's eyes hardened. "A mouth doesn't make a woman safe." Tamsin didn't flinch. "No," she said. "But the right witnesses do." Cal's gaze snapped to the yard. Tamsin's heart hammered. She had no witnesses, not yet. But Cal didn't know what she knew. She let the silence stretch. Then, as if she'd just noticed, she tilted her head toward the barn. "I didn't realize you had company," she said. "Mr. Grint's company." Kincaid went still. Cal's eyes sharpened to slits. Tamsin kept her voice smooth, like she was stating a fact about weather she wasn't allowed to describe. "Town talks," she said, "and I read names. Jory Kincaid." Services rendered. Cal's nostrils flared. She had hit something. Kincaid stepped forward again. "You been snooping in the books?" "I've been working," Tamsin said. "That's what Gideon hired me for." Cal's jaw twitched. "Gideon didn't hire you," Cal said. "Gideon dragged you in because he's desperate. Desperate." The word stung because it held truth. But Tamsin refused to be used as proof of his weakness. "He dragged me in because I'm useful," she said. "And you know it." Cal's smile sharpened again. "Useful women get used up," he said. Tamsin's fingers curled, but she kept her hands at her sides. "If you're done talking," she said, "I'm going back inside." Cal's lantern swung slightly, light shifting over her face. "You're not going anywhere," Cal said. Her skin went cold. Kincaid's mouth curled. "We can't have you running to Gideon with your little stories." Little stories. Like the truth was small, like her life was small. Tamsin's pulse pounded in her ears. She had one chance, not to win. To live long enough to bring the truth into daylight. She took a slow step backward. Cal stepped forward. "Don't," he said. Tamsin backed again. Cal moved faster. And Tamsin did the one thing she'd been saving all day without realizing it. She threw her voice. "Gideon," she shouted, loud enough to rip the quiet open. "Gideon Rusk!" Cal lunged. Kincaid cursed. Tamsin spun and ran, not across the yard, toward the house. The lantern light chased her, bouncing over fence rails, over dirt, over her own shadow, stretching thin and scared. Boots thundered behind her. Cal was fast, but Tamsin had been hungry fast. She hit the porch steps and took them two at a time. The door was locked. Of course it was. Her fingers fumbled, searching for the latch she'd learned yesterday. Behind her, Cal's hand swiped for her sleeve. Tamsin twisted, felt fabric tear, felt the brush of his knuckles against her arm. Her stomach turned. She slammed her shoulder into the door. "Gideon," she screamed again, voice cracking. "Wake up now." The lock clicked. The door jerked open. Gideon filled the doorway, hair mussed, eyes sharp, as if he'd been sleeping with a weapon in his hand, even if he hadn't. Tamsin stumbled inside, nearly falling. Gideon caught her by the elbow firm, controlled, nothing taken. "What happened?" he asked. Cal skidded to a stop on the porch, lantern raised. He tried to smooth his face into something innocent, but the anger was still in his eyes. "Evening," Cal said, too casual. Gideon's gaze went from Cal to the torn sleeve on Tamsin's arm. Something dark moved through Gideon's expression. "You were chasing my wife," Gideon said. Cal held up a hand. "Now, Gideon, don't start that. I saw her creeping around the barn. I was just what?" Gideon's voice stayed quiet, quiet enough to be dangerous. Cal's smile tightened. "Just making sure she wasn't stealing." Tamsin's mouth went dry. Gideon looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Tamsin," he said, and the way he said her name wasn't soft. It was steady. "Talk." Her chest rose and fell too fast. She forced words out. "I went to the barn," she said. "I heard Cal and another man. I heard plans about moving calves, about the sheriff, about setting you up." Cal laughed, sharp. "She's imagining." Gideon's gaze didn't leave Tamsin. "Did you see the man?" Gideon asked. "Yes," Tamsin said. "It was Jory Kincaid." Cal's smile finally broke. For half a heartbeat, his eyes flashed panic. Then they hardened. Gideon's jaw clenched. Kincaid? The name had weight like a fist. Marta appeared behind Gideon, hair loose, face carved with anger. "I heard shouting," she snapped. Then her eyes found Tamsin's torn sleeve, and she went still. "Oh," Marta said, voice turning low. "So that's what kind of night it is." Cal held up both hands, lantern swinging. "Nobody touched her," he said quickly. "She's stirring trouble. You know the bank embarrassed Halver today. Folks are talking." Now she wants to make a name for herself. Tamsin's cheeks burned. Make a name, as if she cared about being seen. She cared about being alive. Gideon's gaze shifted to Cal. "Where is Kincaid?" Gideon asked. Cal's throat bobbed. "I don't know what she's talking about." Marta stepped forward, pointing a finger like a spear. "Cal," she said, "I've watched you for years. Don't you stand there and lie with your mouth full of air." Cal's eyes flicked to Gideon again. "Gideon, come on. You're going to take a drifter's word over mine?" The word drifter hit Tamsin like a slap. Gideon's expression didn't change, but his voice did. "She's not a drifter," he said. "She's here, on my roof, under my name." Cal's face tightened. "You trust her that much?" Cal asked, and there was something ugly under it, hurt and jealousy, like a man who thought loyalty was owed. Gideon's eyes narrowed. "I trust what I see," Gideon said. He stepped onto the porch. Cal backed half a step without meaning to. Gideon's voice stayed calm. "You grabbed her," he said. Cal's mouth opened. You tore her sleeve?" Gideon said. "And you ran when she called my name." Cal's jaw clenched. "Go back to your bunk," Gideon said. Cal blinked. "What?" "You heard me." Cal's eyes flashed. "You can't fire me on her say-so." Gideon's gaze went cold. "I can do what I want on my land." Cal's lantern hand trembled. Marta stood behind Gideon like a wall. Tamsin stood just inside the doorway, heart pounding. Cal's voice dropped. "You'll regret this," he said. Gideon didn't raise his voice. "Maybe," he said. "But you'll regret staying on my porch." For a moment it looked like Cal might lunge. Then he didn't. He turned and walked away, lantern swinging, his shadow stretching long. Tamsin breathed out one shaky breath. Gideon stepped back inside and shut the door. The lock clicked. Then the house went quiet in the aftermath. Marta reached for Tamsin's torn sleeve, not touching skin, just hovering. "You all right?" she asked. Tamsin nodded, but her throat tightened. Gideon's gaze stayed on her face. "You should have woken me before you went out," he said. Tamsin's pride flared. "I didn't want to look foolish," she said. Gideon's jaw flexed. "Foolish gets you dead." The bluntness should have hurt. Instead, it felt like protection. Marta exhaled. "We need proof," she said. Tamsin nodded. "I know." Gideon's eyes held hers. "What exactly did you hear?" Tamsin closed her eyes for half a beat, pulling the words back up. "They're moving calves from the north pasture tomorrow night," she said. "And they're going to make it look like you sold them or lost them. And then they'll bring the sheriff with a paper something forged." Marta swore again. "So they're not just stealing," she hissed. "They're building a case." Gideon's expression darkened. "They've been building it for months." Tamsin's stomach twisted. "Kincaid said Grint wants you ruined, and the ranch signed over." Gideon stared at the table as if seeing a map of enemies. Then he looked up. "Then we set a trap," he said. Marta's eyebrows rose. "Trap?" Gideon's voice stayed steady. "If they want to move calves, we make sure they're moving calves that bring them into light." Tamsin's pulse jumped. "You mean catch them?" She whispered. Gideon nodded. "Catch them." Marta's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly do we do that without the sheriff finding something on Gideon?" Gideon's gaze shifted to Tamsin. "You," he said. Tamsin's breath caught. "Me?" "You read numbers," Gideon said. "You see patterns. You saw Kincaid's name in my books. You know how to make proof." Tamsin swallowed hard. "I can write a clean record," she said slowly. "Copy the entries. Mark the mismatches. Collect receipts." Marta shook her head. "Paper proof won't matter if the sheriff's already sold." Gideon's mouth tightened. "Then we need a witness the sheriff can't ignore." Marta stared at him. "And who is that?" Gideon's eyes went distant, calculating. "The bank," he said. Tamsin blinked. "The bank?" Gideon nodded. "Halver doesn't love me," he said. "But he loves money." If he thinks Grint is stealing cattle tied to a loan, he'll care." Marta let out a bitter laugh. "So we're relying on greed." Gideon's gaze didn't waver. "Greed is reliable." Tamsin's skin prickled. She had spent her life in rooms where greed decided what happened to girls like her. Using it as a weapon felt strange. But it felt like power. Gideon pointed to the ledger. "Tomorrow," he said, "you make copies. You mark every entry Cal touched. Marta, you keep the hands close. Nobody goes anywhere alone." Marta nodded once, grim. Gideon's eyes came back to Tamsin. "And you," he said, voice lowering. "You stay inside after dark." Tamsin's pride bristled. "I can. Inside?" Gideon repeated. The word wasn't a command meant to shrink her. It was a command meant to keep her alive. She forced herself to nod. "All right," she said. Gideon exhaled slowly. Then, to her surprise, he stepped closer. Not invading. Just close enough that she could see the tiredness in him up close. "You did the right thing?" he said quietly. Tamsin's throat burned. "I almost got caught." "But you didn't," he said. "And you came home." Home. The word shouldn't have belonged to her. It landed anyway. Marta reached out then, and with permission asked only by gentleness, touched the torn fabric near Tamsin's elbow. "We'll mend that," she said. Tamsin nodded, eyes stinging. She went to her room and sat on the edge of the bed, hands pressed to her thighs to stop them shaking. She had shouted a man's name in the dark and lived. She had stood in lantern light and not apologized for existing. She lay back and stared at the ceiling until her breathing steadied. Then she slept. Morning snapped into motion. Tamsin worked at the desk with a sharpened pencil and steady fury. She copied pages of the ledger into a fresh book, marking ink changes, crossing lines, mismatched totals. She noted the name Jory Kincaid. She noted the dates. She noted every place Cal's handwriting appeared. She wrote like she was building a fence, one straight post at a time. Marta brought her coffee and didn't speak much. Gideon moved in and out of the room, checking on the hands, checking the fences, checking his own pulse. By noon, Tamsin's hand cramped. She flexed her fingers and kept going. Cal didn't come near the house, but she felt him anyway. She could feel his anger like a presence pressing against the walls. In the afternoon, Gideon set a folded paper beside her. "What's this?" Tamsin asked. Gideon tapped it. "A note to Halver," he said. "No names. Just enough to make him show up tomorrow night with someone from the bank." Tamsin stared. "He'll come." Gideon's mouth tightened. "If he thinks his money is moving on 4 legs, he'll come." Marta sniffed. "And if he doesn't?" Gideon's gaze stayed hard. "And we still catch them." Tamsin swallowed. Catching thieves sounded simple until you pictured the dark, the barn, men with secrets. But Gideon was already moving. He wasn't the kind of man who waited for rescue. He turned to leave, then paused. "And Tamsin," he said. She looked up. His gaze held hers. "You don't have to do this," he said. The words were unexpected. She had expected commands, plans, not choice. Tamsin's voice came out quiet. "If I don't," she said, "you'll lose the ranch." Gideon's jaw flexed. "Maybe," he admitted. Tamsin nodded once. "Then I'm doing it." For a moment, something softened in Gideon's eyes. Not romance, respect. He nodded and left. That evening, Tamsin stayed inside like she promised. But staying inside didn't mean being helpless. She watched from a window as the ranch settled into night work. She saw Cal in the distance, moving between the bunkhouse and the barn, always with the ease of someone who thought he owned the darkness. She saw 2 unfamiliar riders linger near the far fence line, silhouettes against the land. Her stomach tightened. Kincaid's men. Marta came to stand beside her, arms crossed. "They're here," Marta murmured. Tamsin nodded. Marta glanced at her. "You're shaking," she said. Tamsin hated that Marta noticed. "I'm not scared," she lied. Marta snorted. "Good. Then you're a fool. Courage is being scared and standing anyway." Tamsin swallowed. Outside, Gideon moved like a shadow himself, quiet but ready. He didn't carry drama. He carried decisions. Near midnight, a soft knock came at Tamsin's door. Marta opened it, and Gideon stepped in. "We're ready," Gideon said. Tamsin's heart kicked hard. "You said I'd stay inside," she reminded him. Gideon's gaze held hers. "Inside the north shed," he corrected. "You'll be near enough to see what happens, far enough to stay safe. You'll write down what you see. Names, faces, times." Tamsin's mouth went dry. Marta's eyes flashed. "And I'll be with her," she said. Gideon nodded once. Tamsin stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling fingers. "Do I look?" She stopped. The old fear tried to climb into her mouth. "Do I look pretty? Do I look worthy?" Gideon watched her as if he knew what she hadn't said. "You look like a woman with a spine," he said. It was the only thing that mattered. They moved through the house quietly and out into the yard. The night air bit, but Tamsin kept her attention on the shapes ahead. They reached the north shed, a low building near the pasture. Inside, Gideon had set a small lamp with a shutter, keeping the light minimal. Tamsin sat on a crate with her notebook, pencil ready. Marta stood by the crack in the wall, watching. Gideon crouched near the door, listening. Minutes stretched. Tamsin's pulse kept trying to outrun time. Then, far off, she heard it. A low whistle, a gate latch, soft voices. Marta's body went still. Gideon's eyes narrowed. Through the crack, Tamsin saw movement in the pasture. 3 riders. Then a 4th, Cal. He slid off his horse, moving like he belonged to every fence post. Another man swung down beside him. Even in the dark, Tamsin recognized the stance. Kincaid. Her fingers tightened around the pencil. Cal opened the gate. Kincaid moved toward the herd, murmuring. The calves shifted, restless. Tamsin's mouth went dry. She wrote, "Cal Hensley, Jory Kincaid. 3 unknown." She wrote the time as best she could. Then she heard another sound. Hoofbeats, more hoofbeats. A rider approaching fast, determined. Cal turned his head. Kincaid's posture snapped tight. Tamsin's heart slammed. Had Gideon called someone? Had Halver come? Or had the sheriff come on Grint's leash? A lantern bobbed in the distance. The rider drew closer, then another, and another. Marta's breath left her in a sharp hiss. "Bank men," Marta whispered. Tamsin's eyes strained. 2 men rode up, stiff in the saddle like they weren't used to night work. One carried a lantern. The other carried a heavy satchel. Halver himself dismounted, face pinched with annoyance and fear. "What is this?" Halver called, voice sharp. "Rusk!" "You said." Cal's head snapped toward the shed. Kincaid's hand rose slightly, warning. Gideon's body tensed beside the door. Tamsin's pulse pounded. This was the moment. The dark shifted. Gideon stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked into lantern light like he had every right to stand there, because he did. "Evening," Gideon said. Cal's face went pale. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. Halver blinked hard. "Rusk?" he stammered. "You? Why are you here?" Gideon's voice stayed calm. "Because someone is stealing cattle tied to your loan," he said. Halver's mouth opened and closed. Gideon's gaze swept the riders. "Looks like I wasn't wrong," Gideon said. Cal's voice jumped quick. "Gideon, listen, this isn't what it looks like." Gideon's eyes didn't even flicker. "It looks like my foreman opened my gate for Grint's man." Kincaid laughed softly. "Careful, Rusk," he said. "You accuse the wrong people. You'll regret it." Gideon's gaze sharpened. "I'm not accusing," he said. "I'm observing." Halver's lantern hand shook. "What are you doing with these calves?" he demanded, suddenly brave, because money was on the line. Cal's mouth tightened. Kincaid stepped forward, smile returning. "Business," Kincaid said. "Legal business." These calves were sold. Gideon's head tilted. "Sold?" Kincaid nodded, too smooth. "Signed over." Halver frowned. "Signed over by whom?" Kincaid's eyes gleamed. "By Gideon Rusk." Tamsin's blood went cold. From the shed, she saw Kincaid pull a folded paper from his coat. A document. He held it up to lantern light. "And I've got the signature to prove it," Kincaid said. Gideon went still. Halver took a step forward, greedy for certainty. Cal's eyes flicked toward the shed, again toward where Tamsin hid. Tamsin's fingers clenched around her notebook, because she knew what that paper was. A forged signature. A noose made of ink. And now the whole ranch Gideon's land. Her new fragile safety. Everything balanced on whether anyone would believe the truth before Kincaid's lie became law. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.